England faces a dangerous economic squeeze and our food security is being ignored. Want to understand why? Warnings from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, should not be dismissed as routine economic commentary. They point to a growing and immediate risk. Britain, and therefore England, are dangerously exposed to global shocks, and our economic model leaves working people across England carrying the burden. The IMF has made two things clear. First, the UK is highly vulnerable to another energy shock similar to 2021 to 22, when prices surged and inflation exceeded 10%. Second, the British government must tightly control spending or risk a market revolt that could drive borrowing costs even higher. For Rachel Reeves, the British Chancellor, this creates a trap. Support households and risk market panic, or cut back and deepen hardship. This is not just about financial markets. It exposes a deeper structural failure in the UK economy, particularly the handling of energy and food security by numerous British governments. The simple point is that Britain remains heavily dependent on imported energy. When global prices rise, the workers across England are exposed and feel it immediately. The same is true of food. The UK produces only around 60% of the food it consumes. The rest depends on complex global supply chains that are increasingly unstable due to the wars currently occurring and the trade disruption that accompanies them. This is where the real danger lies. Previous British government and this government have built an economy that assumes global markets will always deliver cheap food and energy. That assumption is now seriously breaking down and being rapidly proven wrong. Successive British governments of all political shades have followed similar paths. A globalist and internationalist approach prioritised imports and market efficiency over resilience. Both the Conservatives and the Labour Party have followed a ruthless and foolhardy approach, trying desperately for London to become the new Singapore or Beijing on Thames. Instead, they have created an economy that is weak and struggling to withstand pressure. Despite warnings, the British government has focused on a labour market that deliberately attempted to keep wages low while relying on cheap goods to offset living costs. This is why the deliberate use of high levels of immigration has been supported by big business and the British government. By expanding the labour supply with cheaper labour and suppressing wages, they can maintain access to cheap goods without investing in building a deeper, more resilient economy. This is becoming clearer as workers across England realise that the nationalist rhetoric from the British government has not been matched by meaningful investment in domestic production or strategic reserves. Workers increasingly now recognise that it is just meaningless words. The result is a UK economy with limited buffers. The British government does not stockpile energy at scale. Agricultural capacity has been reduced. They knowingly rely heavily on imports for fertiliser, animal feed, and fresh produce. When shocks occur, whether from war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, or global trade tensions, the British system strains quickly. The IMF warning highlights how little room there is to respond. With national debt near 100% of GDP and borrowing costs rising, the British government has minimal headroom. Even modest policy changes, such as restoring winter fuel support, require either cuts elsewhere or tax increases. That is before any major crisis hits, and we now have one on our doorstep. At the same time, financial markets are increasingly sensitive to British government policy decisions. The experience of 2022 showed how quickly confidence can collapse, driving up borrowing costs and forcing rapid policy reversals. The IMF is effectively warning that this could happen again. It must be listened to. For working people across England, the implications are stark. Rising energy prices feed directly into food costs. Supply disruptions push prices higher still. If British government spending is constrained, there is less capacity to shield households from these pressures, yet protection for workers across England from fuel and food price surges is exactly what is needed. What is missing is a long-term strategy by the British government. Stephen Morris, General Secretary of the Workers of England Union, said, "The British government needs to rebuild resilience in both energy and food systems. That means investing in domestic agriculture, increasing storage capacity, securing supply chains, and treating food and energy security as a national priority, not an afterthought. Without that shift, everyone in the UK and across England will remain exposed to global shocks, with workers paying the price."